Hi everyone, this is Varun Dumidi and you're listening to the Stars and Startups podcast. It's been a crazy few weeks for the podcast as we near the halfway mark to 100 episodes. We're doing really well, guys. We're on episode 38, only 62 more to go for a century. Can't be more excited as there are so many amazing stories to be narrated about the Indian startup scene and the awesome work that's being done. On this episode 38 of the podcast, we chat with Bharath Devanathan of Bounce about electric vehicles and how India is on the path to start seeing a lot more action in the EV space as governments have now stepped in to accelerating the switch from ICE to EVs. We also chat a little bit about Bharath's time at Yahoo on the mail team as well as playing Ultimate Frisbee. Today, I will not ask you to subscribe to the podcast. If you're a regular listener, you're probably already subscribed. But do share the podcast with your friends. It will help me a great deal to reach a lot more people. Okay, hope you enjoy the show. Today we chat with Bharath Devanathan, who I actually met playing Ultimate Frisbee. For those who don't know what it is, we will talk a little bit about it and we'll probably give you some insight. But Bharath is an accomplished professional. He has worked at Yahoo. He worked at Groupon. He set up most of the India operations. Currently, he heads the electric vehicle and growth business at Bounce. So let's say hi to Bharath. Hey Bharat, welcome to the show.
Hey Varun, thanks a lot for having me. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. I couldn't have been more excited about this conversation. We've obviously seen each other while playing on the field, doing other things, but I don't think we've actually talked business. So today I'm super excited because I get to ask you some of the questions that I uncovered while doing a little bit of research for this conversation. But um, you're based out of Bangalore, and it's one of Bounce Ride. Its main market is Bangalore.
Mhm.
Um, how has lockdown been for you guys? How are things, kind of rebounding in the sharing vehicle economy or rather shared vehicle economy?
The lockdown was definitely unfortunate. I mean, for a variety of reasons, business being one of them. But it's just unfortunate that it's affected so many lives, and we're going through this. That said, it's obviously made a lot of us, also realize a few things: what is important, what is not important, and I think that's a whole another topic, and a lot of people have spoken about it.
Yeah.
So let's leave that for another day. But it did affect our business because people, let's say, are not going to office, working from home, have gone back to their hometowns. Schools and colleges are shut. So a lot of these were our primary use cases, right? Now, as the lockdown is, let's say, being lifted slowly with unlock one, unlock two, and unlock three, and now we're here with unlock four, we are seeing usage. It's not at the levels we had pre-COVID in February, but it's continuing to rise week on week, and it's positive. And we're fairly certain that this when the pandemic sort of is resolved in some way, or when there's a vaccine or whatever, there'll be a lot of tailwinds for shared mobility. For kind of obvious reasons, right? People don't want to travel. People who have to travel will not want to travel in close proximity to someone else, right? So you either use your own vehicle, or if you don't have your own vehicle, the next best thing is your own vehicle for a limited amount of time. It's better than going in an auto or Uber or Ola or a bus or a metro, right? So yeah, you're not in close proximity with other folks, so therefore the chances of you sort of contracting any of these viruses is much lower, right? And we definitely see that. So there will be new use cases.
Mm.
We have also seen this in the past. Actually, in China, for example, in the most recent occurrence of COVID, which is in, let's say, February, March, when they recovered, I think they saw other shared mobility operators saw a lot of tailwind. They got back to pre-COVID levels and then even better pretty quickly because of this use case, right? And if you go back about 17 years ago, in 2003, when SARS broke out in China,
Mhm.
We had a very similar effect. Shared mobility didn't exist then, but what happened then was people, didn't want to commute using public transport, but they wanted to commute using their own individual vehicles. So sales of, let's say, two wheelers, right, really shot up. Actually, that was a huge inflection point for the Chinese two wheeler EV market, because around the late 90s, the Chinese government had started, it's very progressive, right? They've started making policies such that down cities, popular cities, in the downtown of these cities, you could not
Mhm.
go with a petrol two wheeler. You could only go with an electric two wheeler, right?
Okay.
And gradually they sort of made the rule such that if you wanted to buy a two wheeler, you could only buy an electric two wheeler. So in 2003, when SARS hit, and then when it subsided, and then the natural reaction was for people to buy two wheelers. The only option for many of them was electric two wheelers, and that was a big surge in
Oh, that must have
two wheeler
propelled
sales.
EV adoption in general. But talking about
Exactly.
two wheelers and and being much safer than any other vehicle, is there much meat to it? I mean, of course, you're still interacting with the vehicle, you're still holding the handlebars, and single person or two people. Well, you're probably together if you're using
Right.
somebody shared. But is there any truth
Yeah.
to it being safer?
I mean, the proximity of your probability of being close to someone else is much lower, right? Than other modes of transport. So that's why I would say it's safer. There's too little time and too little thing to, like, empirically or scientifically prove otherwise. But it's definitely you being close to someone who, let's say, has had an occurrence of this virus. The chances of that are much lower in a two wheeler.
Um, just going back to your earlier point about SARS and China kind of pushing the electric vehicle market forward. Of course, I think globally Tesla's probably been the poster child for EV, starting out in early 2000s, and then the Chinese strategy of in central districts and larger towns, allowing only electric. I believe a large population of their buses are fully electric as well. So
Yeah.
there was a huge thrust towards making electric possible, and I think that has driven down the costs of the manufacturing of electric vehicles in general. But one of the other things was both the US and China had a lot of government schemes and programs that enabled, subsidized the purchasing of vehicles. And surprisingly enough, Delhi announced something quite recently on the EV front, where the government is now willing to subsidize purchase of vehicles. Um,
Mhm.
are you seeing a lot more? Are we going to see a lot more of such initiatives by different governments to uh, push EV consumption in India?
Yeah, definitely think so. Since 2015, actually, we've had this policy called FAME, which has been providing subsidies for uh, purchasing to sort of electric two wheelers at a subsidy. Now we are on the second version of it, FAME 2, I think, which is far more progressive than the earlier one. And on top of this, like you said, the the state governments have also sort of put in some subsidies of their own. So if you combine the state subsidy with the government subsidy, in many cases, it's quite a substantial amount. And I think this is to propel or give it that initial sort of thrust to take on, because I think uh, everyone in India, in many parts of the world, look at what is my upfront cost of doing something like this, and obviously bringing that down, gives a huge impetus to making this happen, right? So definitely, I think the states around India, Karnataka has one, mean, many states have one. Punjab, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, all of these states, many of these states have very progressive EV sort of policies and subsidies. So it's not only for vehicles; it's also for setting up charging stations, land for charging stations. It's land for, let's say, developing EVs or projects related to EVs. All of this stuff.
What's interesting is the I saw the highlights of the Delhi EV policy, and I think for cars it's 1.5 lakhs as a subsidy.
Hmm.
For two wheelers and auto rickshaws and any of these other vehicles, they're giving 30,000 to I think 50,000 rupees, depending on the vehicle.
Yeah,
That's mind blowing money that's probably being set aside. And probably the
yeah,
first ones who get the vehicle are going to get the benefit of it. But also, they're going to be guinea pigs, right? Because, there are not going to be enough charging points. Well, there's an argument to be made that I think you don't need more than one charge for a few days of using a EV. And battery technology has come that far, but is the government spending this the right way, or is there some flaw in the strategy? Because it seems like a large amount for subsidy.
yeah. It does, right. It is a large amount, but there are different ways in which this money is sort of. So in the Delhi government, I'm not really sure, but I can sort of just talk about how a few other governments, both in India and internationally, have done this. Right. So they use something called, I mean, one of the terms for it is called a fee bait, so which is a rebate, but so it's a revenue neutral policy, which means um, so if you are selling, let's say, a million, gasoline vehicles a month, right? And if you add 500 bucks to that, the cost of that, right? So each of those sales will subsidize an EV, right? So that way, you are also incentivizing the 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 buyers to actually buy an EV than a gasoline vehicle. If you want to buy a gasoline vehicle, you can, but it's going to cost you slightly more. And some governments have made it very sort of you know scientific, in the sense it really the the amount that you pay depends on your emissions for that vehicle, right? Uh, so it's a small, let's say, you can call it a tax or you can call it a fee for buying a gasoline. 500 bucks, right? Not much. If you're buying a two wheeler, 500 bucks is not much. If you're buying a four wheeler, let's say 1,000 bucks more or something like that, it's not much. But when that adds up, that kind of money is then used to subsidize EVs, right? So that's one way I'm talking about, but there are other sort of ways as well where it can be revenue neutral. It's not necessarily taxpayers' money that's going into this, but it's yeah. I mean, if you there are two schools of thought, right? People say subsidies are short term, it's not sustainable. Why do it? And the other is we need to have this initial trust for it to happen. And my view is that at least in parts of the world where it's really taken off, there has been this trust in the beginning. Starting from California to China, to and even parts of Europe, right?
Right.
So this is there. So it makes sense to sort of do this.
I think Norway probably has the biggest subsidy scheme. I read
Yeah,
a statistic where they are the most per capita Teslas in the world, and
correct, correct.
I was like,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
is India doing enough though on the EV side? Is that are there parts that could be improved? Because FAME, like you said, was not a great policy to start with, and FAME two. There's also at least from an outsider's perspective, it seems like there's a dependency still on China, and the manufacturing assembling only happens here. From a policy standpoint, it still seems that we're not incentivizing, self like dependency, domestic dependency, and creating a lot more channels.
The Indian government or Indian industry has realized, but it's a bit late. But the realization is the following, right? Is that if you think of it, 7% of India's GDP is oil imports. and another 5% is the auto sector, right? So 12% of the GDP basically depends on the auto sector, right?
Right.
Now, let's assume that we don't do anything on EVs, right? What is going to happen? If oil is going to be replaced by batteries, and all petrol vehicles are going to get replaced by EV vehicles, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And now, if this is the case, then 12% of your GDP is now suddenly a trade deficit, right? Now you have to import, basically, you're sending cash out of the country for this, right? Which is, and if the rest of the world moves away from EVs and we don't, we will move to EVs, but we won't have the capability. So basically, now we are facing a huge trade deficit. So therefore, it's important, one, to move to EVs, and two, to make sure a lot of this is indigenous, right?
Mm.
If you look at, many people have spoken about it, but if you look at, the whole cell phone manufacturing, we missed that bus, right? We
Right.
had an opportunity to do that. We missed that bus. Let's say others, Korea, Japan, China, definitely, right? Have become sort of hubs for that. We
Right.
missed that bus. So here, I think it's kind of late, but I don't think it's so late that we can't do anything about it. So the government has basically said, yeah, FAME is a way for us to accelerate the growth of EVs. But
Mhm.
FAME also has several sort of milestones to it, where it says in 6 months you need to localize X percentage of your vehicle, right? Um, okay, you can start selling it now and you can import it now, but in the next 6 to 12 months, some percentage of that has to start happening in India, and they have given a progressive timeline for that, right? So if you do that, you get a higher subsidy, and if you don't, you don't get a subsidy. So I think those are all steps, definitely in the right direction to localize. So today, I think one thing we lack in India is actually building the battery cell, right? We don't have that, let's say, either the know-how or the know-how to build it at scale.
Mhm.
And it's not something that you can learn overnight. So I know
Right.
several initiatives, both by the government and by other private institutions, are on for doing it. But today in India, we don't have a large scale cell manufacturing unit, right?
Mm.
It's
Mm.
it's in the works. Maybe 12 months from now, or 18 months from now, we'll have something that is solid. But right now, it doesn't exist, right? So therefore, government is cognizant of the fact and saying, okay, you can import cells, but you have to make the battery pack here. You have to do the casing here. You have to do the battery
Mm.
management system here. And over a period of time, you need to localize all of this. That is one. The other is also what China has done very cleverly, and I'm sure you might have read about it in some interesting articles, is they have monopolized, the source, the raw materials that
Yeah.
are required for these cells, right?
Rare
So,
earths.
uh,
uh,
yeah.
Rare
So,
earths is what I call it. I think you get a lot of this. Well, they haven't gone. China itself, their own natural resources have not been, being consumed. I think it's been going to Africa. I think Africa is,
Africa,
I think Congo and that belt, the basin is where a
exactly,
lot of the, mining is happening. And I think Australia is
correct.
the other part, which is probably done in a much cleaner way, but China has also controlled a lot of those resources, uh, right?
Yeah,
Um, I think
exactly.
this is part of that
So,
Belt and Road Initiative, I believe.
yeah, so you're right. So Africa has a lot of these. So the most, let's say, prevalent chemistry today in cells is called NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt. And a lot of these raw materials and are available in Africa, and China has sort of struck deals with the government there to have a forward contract for the next 10 or 20 years. They have agreed to a price, right? So which is a huge boon for the GDP of that country. But China has been very sort of clever and astute about
Yeah.
going about this, right? And also several parts of South America as well. So that is definitely one area where we need to sort of catch up. Um, I think I've read reports that India has deposits of this, and we are finding it here and there. But also, I think there are other places in the world where we are trying to strike deals for these raw materials.
Primarily, these are polluting industries, right? Like if it does come to India, or we decide to do a lot of these things here, there is going to be an environmental cost to it. Um,
Mm.
Talking about environmental costs, you know, where we talk a lot about EVs being the future, etc. But one of the things that India does really well is use its very poor coal deposits, or other poor quality coal deposits to generate electricity. And that's the last numbers I remember reading were about 95 to 96% of all electricity generated is coal. And of course, there is a push towards solar, there's a push towards thermal, but not at the pace that is desirable. But there is some progress. So when we say EV is actually clean, how right are we? Are we just moving the blame to another segment or sector and saying, you know what, we can do as best as we can, but it's actually the problem of the generation, right? Um, is that a concern at all?
I mean, it's a valid question, and here are some ways to think about that, right? So, I think first of all, I think in India, the coal generation, coal accounts for I think about 70 to 80% of electricity produced. The rest are all from other sources, renewable, hydro, and so on. So it's not that high. Used to be that high, but not that high today. Second, today in India, renewable energy is given preference over coal. So renewable energy is not what do you say? You can't predict it, right? Like you don't know when the sun is coming. So and so on. So it's if the sun is out, that is given more preference than other sort of forms of energy. So that policy is also very progressive, right? The other thing is this whole thing. There is something that in this analysis, people talk about what is called a well to wheel ratio. Okay, which means
Okay.
From the well is your the well is the in case of oil it's oil, in case of EVs it's all these rare earth materials, um, and till the time you make a car, right, or make a two wheeler and put it on the road, right. So that's from well to wheel. What is the actual sort of emission and pollution you're causing, right? So here there are several studies. Obviously, there are two sides, claiming things, but largely you will find that the well to wheel there is a ratio for a EV is much lower than that for a petrol vehicle. So on the whole, to put an EV on the road, from scratch, is less polluting than to put a petrol vehicle on the road, right, and make it run over the lifetime of the vehicle. In the sense, not only putting it on the road, but let's say it runs for 3 years, 50,000 kilometers in both cases.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's generally, and there are several studies done in different countries, even done in India on this, right? So I think that's kind of fairly established. That said, you will still find some people who will refute this, but that's how it is, right? So that's so that's how it is. See, the other thing is also eventually you can also use this as a when we get to a point like Norway, for example, right? A lot of Norway's energy is renewable, which is why it makes a lot of sense. So when we are moving towards that, and when we get to a point there, right, then the other reason, like when you're making a transition from let's say fossil fuel to renewable energy, right? One of the big problems there is storage. Okay, because wind energy, for example, it's in the night and in the day you don't know, but whenever it comes, if you produce it, you transmit it to where it needs to go, and you consume it. Then it's great. It's same with solar. Solar happens during the day, and when it's when the sun is out, you produce that energy and you transmit it. It's being used at the same time. It's great. Now, let's say there is not enough demand, so the sun is out, right? But there's not enough. You're producing energy, but there's not enough demand for that energy at that point in time. Then what do you need to do? You need to store that energy, right? Now, where will you store it? Again, you have to store it in batteries. Now, the moment you introduce storage, right, then the cost of this entire solution becomes very high. Okay. So one of the fundamental roles that EVs play here is that they act as a medium of storage as well, right? So, so when you produce renewable energy, if you're if you're able to consume that in, let's say, billions of EVs, which can store it, right?
Yeah.
And which can, that energy can either be used later to for the EV itself, or they can that energy can be used back to the grid. So you supply it back to the grid, or you power your home, or part of your home or something. Like for example, I think Netherlands. This I read recently somewhere. Netherlands has, I think, about 7 million cars.
Wow.
Out of these, if 1 million becomes completely EVs, right?
Mhm.
Then, and if all of them are charged, then that is enough to power the entire Netherlands for 3 hours, right?
Wow. I mean, Netherlands is a small country, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a small country, but and if this energy is renewable, then it makes sense. So I
Sure.
think the larger point I'm trying to make is that one is, yes, EV by itself is also, let's say, it pollutes the earth lesser than petrol, but I think it plays a pivotal role uh, today and a lot more in the future when it acts as a medium of storage for renewable energy, which you can then give it back to the grid.
I mean, that's probably the best explanation I've heard in a long time, because I think it kind of, uh, kind of ties it together when you're saying that, okay, there are so many batteries charging at the same time and consuming renewables when it's actually being created. And I think, I think even in the US, they had a huge challenge when all the homes are generating electricity and pumping into the grid, because there's no one to consume it at that point,
Correct.
right? So then it became that nobody's consuming the electricity, everybody's selling electricity, and the grid has no one to buy it, right? It's a demand and supply side issue. Um,
Correct.
Talking about you know EVs and the proliferation of EVs. I think recently Flipkart slash Walmart decided to convert, or at least they've said that they're going to convert their whole fleet, to an EV, powered grid. And I think Bounce itself decided to, that it wanted to convert 50% of its vehicles. Today, last year was about 11,000 vehicles, and 50% were meant to become EVs over time. And
Mhm.
that's when they brought you in to Bounce, right? That was kind of the plan. Um, how has that program been? What's been the learning in that process?
Yeah. So, see, I think one of the sort of key realizations for me also was in India, right? Or if you look at other parts of the world, right, like China, Norway, US, where electric mobility sort of has taken off. Electric mobility appeared on the scene before shared mobility, right? Which means the
Hmm.
only way at that point in time for people to experience electric vehicles was by buying something of their own, right? In India, that the timing is such that shared mobility has happened before electric mobility, which means shared mobility can be and will be the medium through which electric mobility will first reach the masses, right? And then, so if, for example, I'm able to experience, me and you are able to experience an EV today, for half an hour, and we just pay for that half an hour, right? And there's no upfront investment, nothing. Then, if we wanted to buy a vehicle, we are really convinced about it. Otherwise, it's hard. So basically, shared mobility is acting like a huge, test ride platform for EVs today, right? And that's the exciting opportunity, for us at Dow. See, the transition from petrol to electric vehicles will happen in India. A few years ago, let's say 5 years ago, it was a question of if, but now it's a question of when. It's definitely going to happen. I think we all agree there. And even if whether shared mobility operators like Bounce and others exist or not, this transition is going to happen. But I think operators like Bounce have a huge opportunity to catalyze this transformation, right? And to shave off, if I have to put a number to it, I think we can shave off 3 to 5 years in this transition by being a shared mobility provider that goes fully electric. We will replace one shared mobility vehicle actually replaces 7 to 8 usual vehicles. private vehicles. And then if that shared mobility vehicle is an electric vehicle, it's a it's an added advantage. And let's say the people of India will get to experience, right? So that's the huge opportunity in front of us. We've started. So we started work on this roughly about a year ago. Today, we've done lots of rides on EVs. Today in Bangalore, for example, post lockdown, we have decided to go only EVs. So now we are only operating EV fleet, 100% EV fleet,
Oh wow.
which is which is actually remarkable. We are obviously learning a lot from it, but also I think we're getting a lot of positive feedback from customers as well on the way to go. And it's very liberating. It's very very like noiseless, and it's liberating if you actually if you get open the phone, find a EV next to you, ride it. It's very liberating.
So on the app, the EVs are denoted with a thunderbolt signal, right? Like as a charging
Correct.
signal. Has this
Yeah.
actually changed consumer preference to using an electric vehicle versus a petrol vehicle? Have you seen some of those shifts in the consumption?
We we actually studied that pretty deeply. So if a vehicle is like the conversion rate for an electric vehicle and a petrol vehicle is similar. There are no differences there. The one
So
thing
so
is
they just
there
want to
was
get
a
from point A to point B, and there's no
exactly.
okay. Hmm.
They want to go point A to point B. We had and still have a bit of a customer education hurdle to go through, because these EVs don't make noise. See, because the first, what is we've all grown up on two wheelers, right? So our first tendency is to put the key in, rotate it, then hold the brake, right, and press the start button, right, and then we hear some
Right,
noise,
right,
and then we say, okay, now the bike is on, right?
right, right,
But this doesn't happen in an EV, right? So when it doesn't make noise, right, and there is no start, but it doesn't make noise, people think, okay, this thing is not functional, right? So now let me look for another bike. So I had to go through that customer education hurdle, both on the app and a few other means, tutorials, some PR, and all of that. I think that we've solved that. I won't say 100%, but to a large extent.
Oh man. From your experience, one of the things that really stood out was your time at Yahoo in the early days, and I really wanted to, before we start wrapping up this call, I really wanted to get into talking about email, right? At least for me, one of my first emails was Yahoo Mail. And I probably got the most random email address because when you're new to the internet, you don't know what the hell you're doing. So you just create whatever email you think is cool at that time. Um, but you know, um, at the same time, um, Gmail launched. I wouldn't say same time, but a couple of years later, you know, Google launched their product, which kind of mimicked the cleanliness and that easy user interface like the search did, and pretty much obliterated the search business for a lot of other players. Um, the mail started doing that, and I saw that you worked on the mail around this time to probably resurrect or say, okay, can we salvage something here? Was that the plan? How did that go? What I mean, I'm super excited to learn about what happened at that time inside of
Yeah.
Yahoo.
So there are some interesting stories there. So first, some context, right? So this was in 2004. Yahoo was offering a free mailbox. I mean, a mailbox for free, and the size was 6 MB. Okay. If you paid
Yeah.
$5 a month, you would get 25 MB. Okay. Now, when you think of it, it sounds odd, but that's how it was, right? And I think if you paid a little bit more, you would get some more MB. But these were sort of the tiers. Now, so that's, and people are using email for all kinds of things, right? Like for communication, for sending, like Britney Spears videos, all of this stuff.
Yep, yep. Forwards. We were saying forwards.
Yeah, yeah. So
Everybody said
the
forwards.
WhatsApp forwards were, yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, just to set the context again, that in 2004, Yahoo had a free mailbox for of 5 or 6 MB. If you paid $5 a month or so, you'd get 25 MB, right? And at that point, I was working on in the Yahoo data team. In January 2004, I think Yahoo somehow heard that Google is trying to do something with email. Okay. Then what Yahoo did was it gathered what it thought were the best engineers from around the company to actually sort of rebuild Yahoo Mail, right? Because one is it's from increasing size from a 5 MB to whatever 1 gig is not just increasing size, but you have to re-architect a lot of it, right? And one of the first things was search, right? So searching a big mailbox means you have to index the mailbox and you do it in real time. So I worked on that project. They launched Gmail and they said unlimited Gmail, right? So people are wondering whether it's a joke or it's actually true. And it was great PR, really stunning PR. And that's how they launched. And the second thing they did was it was invite only. So you were cool if you had a Gmail address. And it definitely created the right kind of buzz for a product like that. And then I think we were head on for about 2 years, Google and Yahoo Mail, and Google had a lot of I think technologically they made some advancements, but I think we also really revamped Yahoo Mail to be a big mail storage. One of the first things I worked on was mail search, and then the second thing was mail storage. How do you actually store and reduce the cost of storing so many emails? But it's really, really fun time. I think it was a really good team. We had to move quickly. I think a lot of my formative years of my career were in those times, and
Right.
I really learned a lot. I was fortunate to be surrounded by some really good folks, both professionally, who are good at their work, and both as people. It's really, really good to have. And many of them have gone on to do great things. My ex-boss now reports to Sundar Pichai. Another guy, Michael Curtis, who was working on Yahoo Mail with us, went on to become head engineering at Airbnb, and now he's left them. So we worked with a really, really good set of folks at that point.
I'm excited about this talking about people you worked at Yahoo, but I want to broach that topic in just a few seconds. You having worked and seen the mail experience, and you know what goes into creating a mailbox and a beautiful mailbox. There's been the email business has again been buzzing, right? I think after 12, 13 years of us using Gmail and all these other services, I think Superhuman launched almost as I think they're a client, right? Superhuman works as a client on top of any existing mailbox. And then uh, recently, I'm sure you got the invite for Hey.com. And it looks like they've completely rebuilt email from scratch, and it's not a client. Are you a subscriber to any of these guys? What's your take? I mean, because Superhuman charges, I think, $30 a month for using the client, and Hey.com is offering the whole solution for $99 a year.
Right.
And I think people are starting to feel like, okay, it's about time we paid for email and we got a better experience. And a lot of people are now moving towards that. You being a email veteran, I want to hear your thoughts and if you're using any of these tools.
Yeah. So Superhuman, I've heard of definitely, but I haven't used it, so I really don't know. Hey, I subscribed to. I got the invite and I subscribed to it, and then I bought it. So now I have a year's subscription. I like.
So you're Bharath at Hey.com.
I didn't get Bharath, so I got Bhatta at Hey.com.
Okay.
Okay.
For those who listen to this, Bhatta is his nickname. That's Bharat's. That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got that, and so I've been using it. I think it really they have reimagined email, and they are kind of forcing you to do the workflow which they think is right, or the right way email should be done, which I think is a very courageous and brave step. And I mean, not everything in that workflow sort of comes naturally to me, but I'm trying to But most of it I really like. Like I love the reply later feature. I love the fact that you can change subjects. I love the fact that no spy, no guy can track you whether you've opened the email or not. Um, I love clips, right? So if you send me an important phone number, I can only save that somewhere. I don't have to save that
Oh,
whole email
nice.
somewhere,
Hmm.
right? So those are all some really good features. So they've really understood, gone 5 levels deep and understood what's the problem with current email and try to solve that. And as I think Aaron Levy says, right, of like the thing with software, you don't need software for an existing process, but you
Yep.
need to redesign the whole process, right? And I think that's what these guys have done very, very well.
So, do you see yourself completely switching over to A.com? Because I'm
I
guessing
have
this is
I
your
have
trial.
switched.
Okay,
No,
so
I've
you're
switched.
saying
Yeah. So I mean, it's an auto forward from Gmail, but I hardly open Gmail.
so now you can just scroll through your emails and you're like, yeah, this is how life should be. Like, I'm done with
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. I should try and figure out how to get on this platform. Uh,
I have an invite. I'll send you.
I have an account. I just haven't renewed it.
Okay,
Uh,
cool.
I decided I'll test it out. But yeah, if I need an invite, I'm going to ping you for that.
Sure.
Hey, getting to the amazing alumni of Yahoo, and Yahoo has a ton of them. Uh, we actually met playing Ultimate Frisbee, you and I. And for those who don't know, and I probably mentioned in my preamble, we'll give you a quick primer. But there are actually grown men like us who run behind a frisbee and a disc, and we call it a sport, and it's actually a lot of fun. So for those who haven't seen it, please go to YouTube, check it out. It's exciting. It got us back to playing sport after school and college and all these other things. As professionals, we also enjoyed it today. Um, but as we're talking about frisbee, I read um, somewhere that you actually played frisbee, or you picked up frisbee playing with the current, or rather, the co-founders of WhatsApp, Jan Koum and Brian Acton. Um, and you have some interesting stories about playing with them. Um, how did they, how did this work? Like, they were at Yahoo at the same time you were, and you had like a frisbee club at Yahoo, and you guys just like hung out. What's the story
Yeah.
there?
So Brian was a very, very big fan of the game, and I think still is. So he would try to gather people together and sort of host games. There was a park, just less than 5 minutes drive from where we were. So we used to go there, I think, Tuesdays and Thursdays and play. And we used to have, I think, an email group where we would say, how many people are in, and so on and so forth. And so, I played. I used to play a lot of sports when I was younger, and then I just wanted to try this. Brian used to try to get he was very passionate about the game, and he used to try to get a group of folks together. And I think one of the things he did also was he got, I think, 100 or 200 discs made, with like the Yahoo logo and all of that, and distributed it to all of us. Brian at that time was fairly, I would say, senior in the organization, uh, but you would never know that by when you met him, either in the office or outside. Very, very humble, very down to earth, very approachable. Really great guy to be around. And all kinds of like execs would sort of, like David Philo, who was the founder of Yahoo, used to be there. And many other execs used to. So it was, for me, it was a great way to get to know these people,
Hmm.
as well as to enjoy the game, learn the game. I think we also went to one or two tournaments together. Um, and yeah, but it was just, and I had moved from India to the US. It was also a great way for me to build a social circle. um, outside of just my sort of working colleagues. So really got to know lot of the US, I think, or at least US culture to whatever extent through these folks. And that's the other good thing about Frisbee, which I'm sure you've also seen, is that it's a great community for where you want,
Yeah.
anywhere in the world.
Talking about community, I think a lot of Silicon Valley founders play Ultimate. Um, I I think Larry Page and Sergey Brin also recruited actively while playing. They take the senior hires out for a game, and they will see what this person is all about. I thought it was super interesting. So when Brian and Jan were at Yahoo, were they ever talking about WhatsApp as an idea? Or I think that probably came much later, right? After they moved
Yeah,
on. Did they call up
that came
Bharat
much
and
later.
did they call up Bharat and say, hey, we're thinking about something. Do you want to come by? Did you ever get a chance to
I
be
wish
part of the
they
core
did.
team?
No, I wish they did. I was unfortunately not in the US at that point, and I wish they did. Though I did get another call from another famous startup, which is doing very well now, and I was outside the country, and I couldn't, I couldn't go and didn't go. But yeah,
This is not Uber,
they
is
didn't
it?
speak about. No, it's not Uber. It's Facebook. No, they were not talking about this at all. They both. So Jan at that point was not uh, as senior. I would say Jan was. I don't know if yeah, maybe a year or 2 or 3 years, more senior than me. But Brian was definitely very senior. So Brian was doing a lot of things that were sort of, really impacting the core business. Yeah, I don't recollect uh, I think they started in 2008, so I don't think, and I was there till 2007, so I don't think they had any of these things. Then.
Well, sometimes you just wait for those kind of calls, right? Folks, and they respect you enough to pick up the phone and call. But I guess if you don't actually work with them, sometimes the relationship is also different because
Yeah,
they identify with you socially. I mean, you can still call up Jan for a beer, and I'm sure he's gonna hang out with you. Um, when you came back to India after Yahoo, um, well, you then spent some time in management consulting, and then you launched Groupon in India, right?
mhm.
Um, there's so much I need to ask you about deal sites and how the Indians took to deals and what is deals today. But I think I'm just going to ask you a very simple question. Are you a value shopper? Do you have your favorite website to get the best price?
I, I would like to think I'm a value shopper that I don't pay too much for what I want, but I don't think I necessarily go for the cheapest or spend a lot of time, finding the cheapest deal. I have somehow, I don't know what it is, but there is some magic Amazon has done over the last few years where they've converted me as a loyal customer. And I can't even place my finger on it. I don't know how, but they've just done it. And I'm sure they've done it for a lot of people. So most of my shopping happens there.
I think it's habitual, right? Like I think once you keep
Yeah,
using it, there is. I mean, I think the price is also. Now I start calling fair. You're not going to get the best price. Maybe a few
yeah,
hundred rupees plus or minus, but you're probably still going to get a good deal. Um, do you think deal sites have run their course in India?
yeah. I would think so. Yeah, it's especially now for sure in these COVID times. But I somehow think we've not. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think we've found the right hit the right chord with the deal sites or with the customers of the deals.
But it's also a supply demand thing, right? Because deal sites typically take a lot from the restaurants or the owners. I think they pay too high of a share, and I think they
Mm-hmm.
don't get loyal customers. Um, because when I used to run the Citrus wallet, we used to get all kinds of requests from retailers and from saying, "Hey, give me this, give me that," and we just couldn't incentivize a lot of these transactions. Um, but I could talk to you all day about what's happening on the deal sides. But hey, Bharat, this has been great. Thanks for sharing insights on EV. And have you gone out to play frisbee at all? Has the lockdown enabled you to step out a little bit?
So I do throws. I live very close to Doc. You know Doc from Airbenders, right? I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So Doc and me get a couple of throws with frisbee.
See, for you,
Once
I've
a
got
week.
frisbees on the background, right? So today,
Yeah,
that's the change in my backdrop today.
nice.
Oh, that's awesome. So you guys are a pod like now. You're like the COVID. You guys are COVID buddies. You're like, okay,
Yes,
I'm not going to
yeah,
see anybody else.
yeah, exactly. We take our masks and go to a ground close by and throw for an hour, maybe a week, an hour or 2 hours. It's
Oh,
good.
that's exciting, man. I think everybody's expecting, or hoping that uh, lockdown becomes a lot more easier. Well, I think now there's no more lockdown. It's more about us taking precautions to want to play, um, and it becomes
Yeah.
easier for us to be out and play again. Hey, Bharat, I'll see you on the ground very soon. Thanks a ton for coming on and having this chat.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. It was great. A lot of fun being here, and definitely look forward to seeing you on the ground and otherwise as well. Take care.
Yeah, and I'm excited about bounce and the EV strategy. So we'll check back in in a few months on how things have progressed.